Hey there, baseball fans. Nathan Rohde here for Prep Baseball Report with the latest episode of Coffee and Curveballs. We've got a special edition this week as we're very college-centric. So, of course, we have a special guest on in Aaron Fitt of D1Baseball.com, and he'll join me as well as Shooter Hunt to talk about the recent comings and goings of college baseball. Aaron, thanks so much for joining us. You're coming to us from, Louisville today?
I am in Louisville. I apologize for the lack of scenery behind me here in the hotel room. But it's a pleasure, of course, to be on with you fine gentlemen. And I wanted to start off, I got a little surprise for you here. I wanted to read something I dug up. You guys might remember just a couple weeks ago we had the Dairy Queen Classic up in Minnesota. Well, 10 years ago, there was a Dairy Queen Classic that featured Shooter Hunt himself.
Oh, no!
And I've got this report from a National League cross-checker who saw Shooter in 2008, and here's what he said after that weekend. He said, Shooter could be a legit frontline number 1 or number 2 guy in the big leagues. He was very, very good. He overthrows a little bit, but he showed the ability to maintain the velocity deep into games, shows the ability to spin a breaking ball and get it in the zone, or he could bury it when he wants to. I liked him better than Brett Hunter of Pepperdine because of the intensity and the better presence. So I want to know, Shooter, what the heck happened? You were supposed to be the next ace in the major leagues. Come on, man.
Maybe I had too much ice cream up in Minnesota at the Dairy Queen Classic. It slowed me down a little bit.
That's
we're glad to have you here with us instead.
Thank you.
We're happy to have him with us. So I know he can still chuck it a little bit. He throws with his younger brother, who could be a stud one day that you'll be covering at Mississippi State in a couple of years, Aaron. But let's roll right into it. Today we're going to do a weekend review. Each of us was in different cities this past weekend checking out some college baseball. But because we're a month in, we'll also get some early takes from Aaron, talk about some teams and players with stock up, some teams who kind of are looking at the stock down, and then maybe some things to watch for the rest of the season. And then hopefully at the end we'll have some time to go over some fantastic freshmen and reference the article that Kendall Rogers posted last week and give some love to those new guys. But to start you guys off, I'll let you know I was home here in North Carolina where now it's snowing. But I saw a couple games out of UVA and Duke, mostly to see Griffin Conine and then Daniel Lynch of Virginia. But Aaron, we were talking about in our just like a little pre-show meeting here, Virginia, that lineup looks a little thin now with McCarthy and Simmons being out of it.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. For me, if you're looking for a team to maybe revise downward a little bit here going forward, it's probably Virginia because, those are really their two best players heading into the season. I mean, Simmons was a big-time run producer last year. He's going to miss the whole season with that shoulder injury. And McCarthy now has a broken wrist, and he's, first-team preseason All-American, just a dynamic player, as you guys know. He's like a 70 runner and a good left-handed hitter and really the best guy they got. And so you take those two players out of the mix, I still think there's talent here. They're going to need more from some of their younger guys. I'm kind of waiting for Devin Ortiz to see more of a role here. And, Papantonis is a guy that, as you guys know, is a big time.
A lot of Jersey guys.
Yeah, there you go. They love their Jersey guys down there in Charlottesville. But he's been working his way back from that knee injury. I think they need to get him back to 100%, and I think he's making progress. That could be another key piece to step forward here. But they've got some nice veterans there. I mean, Andy Weber and Justin Novak and Caleb Knight. And those are nice, quality winning pieces, but they just don't really scare you the way that McCarthy and Simmons did. So I still feel like Virginia is well coached as they are, as much talent as they have. They're solid enough on the mound. I don't think it's a blow you away pitching staff, but that coaching staff does such a great job finding the answers every year. I still think they're a regional team, but will they be a top 25 team going forward? I have some doubts about that.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Even without those big guys like McCarthy and Simmons, we're still talking about UVA. We're still talking about Virginia and what that program has become in the last 10-plus years. So you can't, fully count them out, obviously, out of a regional, out of a postseason run, because that's just, the way that program operates now. But it definitely makes that, uphill battle a little bit harder without a couple of guys like that. But you mentioned the pitching staff, and I saw Daniel Lynch, and it's the first time I saw him pitch for Virginia. Didn't get the opportunity the last couple of years. He's pretty interesting and definitely, a good college arm that, could be on an ace on a lot of teams. It's not overpowering stuff, but he locates well. The fastball was mostly 90-91 for the first 4 innings, went pretty heavy on the secondary stuff in those later innings. But he can spin a breaking ball and he can manipulate it. If he was arm side, have some depth. Away to the right-handers, or he would kind of, get on the side of it and throw a little bit more of a slider if it was to a left-handers, especially a guy like Griffin Conine. I think the matchup between Conine and Lynch was, showed that side of pitchability, exploiting, a potential weakness in Conine, in that Lynch went high and away fastball first pitch. So, Conine's a fastball hitter, but he likes balls inside because he's got that pull power. So he laid off of it, and then Lynch went breaking ball away that, Conine swung and missed, and then he went breaking ball out of the zone away, swing and miss, strike 3. So definitely that was an interesting and fun matchup. A tough one for Conine, so, it's difficult to judge him, facing some tough lefties that day. But I did see him hit a home run on Friday, which was an absolute laser show.
It was a bomb. Rody, you hit on something interesting there that, Lynch showing you that breaking ball I think is important because that pitch has lagged behind his changeup in the past. He's got really good feel for the changeup. That was his best secondary pitch. And I know he's worked to develop the breaking ball. I don't know if you saw any cutters from him. I think that's in his repertoire as well. I think this guy is fascinating because you look at him and it's a great body. It's a tall left-hander. The delivery is really easy. You feel like there's more projection here. There's more velocity to come. And he has bumped 93 or 94 at times in the past. He doesn't pitch there, but and he was great in the Cape Cod League last summer. But he hasn't really performed consistently in the spring yet during his career. I mean, his first 2 seasons, it was a 5+ ERA, and heading into this past week, I think it was a 6+ ERA. So. Want to see him put it together, and Virginia needs him to do that. So it sounds like you had a pretty encouraging look at him. That's a good sign because
if Daniel Lynch pitches like he did this weekend against Duke, for the rest of the season, then I think Virginia actually would be in pretty good shape on the mound. If they need a guy like him to be like that, if he continues to what he did do on Saturday, it'd be pretty good for the Cavaliers. But let's let Shooter chime in here. Shooter, you're out on the West Coast where somehow in Portland, Oregon, the weather is better than I have it. But you got to see Oregon State and Cal State Fullerton. Just tell us about that matchup and what you got to see out of those guys.
Well, I'm getting hit by the sun, which is very rare here in Portland. But when Oregon State goes to number 1 in the D1 baseball rankings, I guess the sun comes out and 70 degrees is how it's going to be for the future. But it was a great weekend. Big matchup. Fullerton, Oregon State. Oregon State, obviously, without Nick Madrigal this weekend, which usually would kill a team. Looking at McCarthy at Virginia, which is going to hurt them a lot. But that Oregon State lineup's pretty deep, and right in the middle, a couple guys that I really like. Trevor Larnach, who I've watched now for 3 years. His first year where he got a lot of tough pinch hit at bats, where he struggled a little bit. And last year, and the last couple of years in the Cape up in Falmouth where I played, so I've been following him there. He had good summers, good year last year, and this year got off to a great start. And just the presence in the box. He's about 6'3", 200 pounds, 205. It's long and athletic. I think he'll add even more strength in the future. He's always had the ability to go to the opposite field, so left center, driving balls to the gap. He's added a little bit more of that pull power. There's still more on the way. It was a lot of top spin and batting practice, but just standing in, it's a physical presence where guys, you have to pitch to a guy like that differently. So he was in the 3-hole, plays a solid right field. But I was blown away this weekend. Oregon State, Adley Rutschman, who's a 2019 draft, so he's just a sophomore now. Catcher, kid from Oregon, was outstanding. Last year, I thought his left-handed bat kind of struggled. He's a switch hitter, natural righty, big power from the right side. But this weekend, left-handed, I thought he was fantastic. He hit one of the furthest balls I've ever seen hit in person. No doubter, cleared the bleachers in right field, real patient at the plate. But the power's there from the left side, and he almost looks like Matt Wieters, a guy who played back in the day at Georgia Tech, obviously now major leaguer. I don't want to blow him up too much, but it's very similar. Switch hitter, Adley, Rody, I think you saw him on the mound in high school, 94, 95, where Wieters was probably 88 to 92 at Georgia Tech. But even more so, me being a pitcher, watching the guy receive the way that Adley does back there, he handled the low strike from Luke Heimlich, who's 94, 95 on the left side, and scattered it a little bit in his outing on Friday, but he sticks it. It's real soft hands, and obviously the big arm behind the plate. He's one next year. It's going to be, a pretty special type player. Could become one. But moving on into Heimlich, who is the Friday night guy there at Oregon State. They ended up losing to Fullerton, Fullerton, after last week with Hookie benching those guys, that message got sent and well received by the players because their energy on Friday night was outstanding. They really brought it, and Heimlich, although it was still really good stuff, up to 95. It's a quick arm. The slider really plays. It's a swing and miss pitch, and he toyed with hitters a lot. But his ability to command the fastball wasn't as sharp as it usually is out of him. He works fast. Everything's really athletic. But, again, it was 75 of 111 pitches for strikes, so it wasn't like he was terrible with it. But it wasn't pinpoint where you usually expect out of him. But he battled out there. But, again, I can't say enough about Fullerton on Friday night. To go and, they've got off to a rough start after being a preseason top 15 team. To go into Corvallis, which I was telling, I don't know if I was telling you this weekend, Rody, all the new stadiums in the SEC and the ACC, they're building all these nice cathedrals, and it's almost become, some of those parks are a little too nice. It doesn't have the old feel of an Alex Box or a Dudy Noble, where it was almost like these guys are right on top of us. In Corvallis, they're on top of you still. It's a nice ballpark, but the fans are outstanding, and they're very polite about it, the way that they rag umpires and stuff. But I thought the atmosphere there, it was packed stadium for the weekend. But again, moving forward, Oregon State has a chance to be another special team. I don't think they're as deep on the mound. They got some young guys who looked okay. Kevin Abel came in relief. He's just a freshman, so his command of the strike zone's not great yet, but he's got that big breaking ball. He can run up there in the low 90s. But again, you're always going to talk about Oregon State in the top 10 for the rest of the year.
I like what you said about Rutschman, first of all, who, I had the same thought last year seeing him as a freshman, and he didn't really hit last year consistently, but the Wieters thing, it just leaps out. It's such an obvious comp, and you hate to make that comp on a kid. It puts a lot of pressure on him, but my goodness, physically, a switch hitter with that kind of arm strength and that kind of defensive ability, I totally agree. I think Kendall does as well. He's special. And Larnick, I'm glad you brought him up too, because that's an arrow up guy this year for the draft. A guy that has tantalized with the tools and the frame, and it's, he's really figuring it out. He had a good year last year. He's having a great year so far this year.
Yeah, he hammered some balls, and there was some swing and miss in there. He swung over some changeups and fouled some balls straight back that, were hittable, but he also got into a few that were really good. And then Caden Griner, another one at shortstop right now. He's playing without his second base mate Madrigal over there, but he's so relaxed on the field. I think at the next level, he's probably more of a utility second base, can spell at shortstop, maybe go to third. In the box, it's a launch angle type guy, but he gets on fastballs and hitters counts, and he doesn't get cheated. So it's just a very mature lineup with those big dudes in the middle. But again, without Madrigal there, it's just obviously going to be a touch below, but once he comes back, you're talking about big things for the Beavs.
Certainly. And Aaron, you're in Louisville right now, but you got a good dosage of Kentucky, the state of Kentucky baseball this weekend. But you started out with Texas Tech at Kentucky. Just real quick, tell us a little bit about that. It seems like you come away with, you knew Kentucky was good, but it really seems like after this weekend that they're the real deal.
Yeah, this is 2 weeks in a row they've left that impression, because Kendall saw him last week at the Shriners College Classic where they went 3-0, and he walked away saying, wow, Kentucky is really, really good. And my impression after 2 games this weekend was, wow, Kentucky is really, really good. It's And we knew they had big-time arms, of course. I mean, I think that rotation with Sean Jelly and Zach Thompson and Justin Lewis is one of the best in the country. Right there, not too far behind Florida. Love the bullpen with Sean Mockmer and Zach Hockey leading the way. Two big power arms, but plenty of depth there. They got some firm velocity, low slot guys they can throw at you. They can mix and match and shorten the game. So it's a great pitching staff. But the thing that's really impressed me, guys, is the offense, because they lost a bunch of key pieces from last year, and they've had to plug in some JUCO transfers. They're not using any freshmen. They got some older guys, some 4-year bounce backs that they could throw in the lineup, and they've really hit the ground running. Ryan Johnson has figured it out, a guy that, as you guys remember, was a pretty big-time talent in high school, a big recruit for TCU, who struggled there, just wasn't a fit, went to JUCO ball, and boy, he looks great right now for Kentucky. I mean, left-handed bat with power. He's taking good at bats. Like the approach. He's been a difference maker. TJ Collette has been an emerging talent for them as a sophomore. Kurt Heyer has had a huge year as an older guy. I mean, they've got depth behind the plate with Troy Squires and Cole Cottom, were both very good players, veteran guys that can hit and impact the game in so many different ways. I mean, they're just relentless up and down the lineup. There was one game, one sequence on Saturday where they executed 3 straight squeezes, and they didn't even make an out. Didn't even make an out on any of them.
Yeah.
They just kept pressure on, and they took free bases, it seemed like, at will. They ran all over Texas Tech. They're just very well coached and instinctive and relentless offensively. So that's really impressive to me, is to lose as much firepower as they lost last year, and to keep doing this. I mean, without Evan White and without Riley Mahan, it's pretty loud. That's a great coaching staff. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, it certainly is. And then you got to move a little bit across the state and catch Louisville in that rubber match with UNC. And it sounds like Riley Thompson was simply electrifying for you.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy that has a huge arm, you'd see him up to 98 out of the bullpen last year. He missed the previous season with Tommy John surgery, so he doesn't have that much experience. I think it was only 14 innings last year as a redshirt freshman. They were hoping he could make that transition to being a weekend starter. And he'd shown flashes the first few weeks, but I don't think he had lasted more than 5 innings in any of his first few starts, and career high was 4 strikeouts. Yesterday he turned a corner, because he struck out 10, more than doubled his career high. Pitched into the 7th. He was really, really good for 6 innings. The thing that impressed me was, not only is he showing great velocity, he was up to 97, but he held his velocity at 94, 96 through 6 innings. And it dipped a little bit in the 7th, but you don't see a lot of guys throwing 96, in the 6th inning.
No.
With a hammer too. I mean, it's I think it's a breaking ball that flashes plus pretty regularly, and is consistently at least average. 78 to 84. He can add and subtract from a little bit. He can backfoot it against lefties. That's a big time weapon. I think the changeup still needs to develop some, but he's got good arm speed on it. So he could be a 3-pitch guy. The command is coming. They got to him in the 7th inning the other day, but still really liked what I saw. That was a very encouraging development for Louisville.
Excellent. So let's move on now to just talk about some early takes. We're a month into the season. Obviously, still plenty left to go, so a lot can happen. But Aaron, why don't you give us a couple of teams that are kind of trending up? The stock is up on them, from the preseason rankings to now.
Well, certainly Stanford, and we talked about Kentucky, certainly Stanford is also in that mix. That's a team that has risen from the teens in our rankings. They're all the way up to number 3 now. Really an impressive body of work, sweeping Cal State Fullerton, sweeping Rice in a 4-game series, and then 3 out of 4 from Rhodey's Michigan Wolverines. And then, of course, they go on the road this past weekend to Texas and win 3 out of 4. It's hard to win 4-game series in college baseball.
Yes, it is.
Those are usually splits. One where if you can go 3-1 or sweep 4 games against a good team on the weekend, that's loud. And they've now won 3 of those 4-game series. So incredible body of work. They're pitching at an exceptionally high level. Tristan Beck has come back strong from that back injury that kept him out all last season. He's a legit ace in a first-round candidate again, and Chris Bubich, the left-hander, Kendall saw him this weekend in Texas and said, it really looks legit. I mean, it's a guy that has had pitchability. The velocity had fluctuated at times in his career, but he was firmer this time around. I think he's getting stronger. That's a great 1-2 punch, and they've got some depth behind him. The only question, I guess, would be, will the bullpen shut you down against a really good opponent? They've been pretty good so far, but I think the quality of arms of the bullpen drops off a little bit from the rotation.
Gotcha. And then it looks like Clemson is also on the rise as well, going unranked in the preseason. And Patrick Cromwell and Logan Davidson obviously have been at the center of the Tigers' rise to number 10 most recently.
Yeah, and certainly Seth Beer, of course, is Seth Beer. I mean, we know that. He's an established commodity. Davidson was kind of that guy heading into the season that I pegged as a rising superstar. A guy that as a sophomore, he was a very good freshman. I thought he could become an All-American as a sophomore. You go watch Clemson, and he jumps off the field. I mean, it's a great body, lean and rangy and athletic and twitchy, and he's a switch hitter with power from both sides, controls his zone extremely well. He's a walk machine. I saw those guys play South Carolina last weekend, and I think he had 8 walks in 3 games. So he's on base all the time, and then he's hitting a double from one side of the plate and a homer from the other side of the plate, and he can run. I mean, he's a 5-tool guy, and I think he's very special. But having him hitting in front of Beer, kind of setting the table, and then Cromwell behind Beer, along with Chris Williams, that gives. That top of the lineup is very, very difficult to navigate. I mean, Cromwell was that JUCO guy from California who started the year last year in the starting lineup and lost his job. And, adjusting to Division I from the JUCO ranks is a struggle for some guys. And he's figured it out now. He's a guy that has power, has athleticism, great defender at third base. So he's been certainly a key piece for the Tigers. I still feel like the rotation, to me, is the one area where I might have a long-term question mark. I mean, those guys have done a nice job, Jacob Hennessy and Brooks Crawford and Jake Higginbotham. But is that an Omaha caliber rotation? I'm not so sure it is. I mean, they may be able to get there anyway, but those guys aren't. They're not going to stand toe-to-toe with Singer and Coar and Dyson in Florida, or those Kentucky guys, or some of the other really good staffs out there. They're just going to try to piece it together, get 5 innings out of those guys and hand it off to the next guy.
And then a couple players, let's talk about, kind of give a little bit of a draft taste on this episode. Casey Mize obviously was a guy going into the season. Some durability questions surrounding him from the past, but so far so good for the Auburn righty. Yeah,
guys, for me, Mize, if I was doing my midseason list, my individual midseason draft list, he's number 1. And I had him number 1 in the preseason, too. I mean, this is an area where David Seifert and Kendall Rogers and I disagreed. Those guys liked Singer, and Singer's a fine choice. He's a great pitcher. He's a bulldog. His stuff is awesome. He's pitched in Omaha. But Mize, to me, is better. I just think, the stuff is a little more electric. I mean, you'll see Mize up to the high 90s, and he can pitch pretty comfortably there in the mid 90s with a put away, filthy changeup with kind of splitty action on it. That's, I think, a legit plus pitch, and the breaking balls come a long way too. So he's good. He almost threw a perfect game this weekend. He had to settle for no hitter. Auburn is what I think they're 15-1, something like that now. Yep. They haven't played the toughest schedule, but I think they're ready to go now, rolling into SEC play. And for me, if there's any pitcher I want on my team right now, it's Casey Mize.
Wow. Excellent. And then Cole Sands at Florida State, with Tyler Holton going down, he kind of steps into that Friday role, and it looks like he's kind of relished that opportunity.
Yeah, he's done a great job with it, and this was a guy that, again, came to Florida State with a lot of buzz out of high school. He was a big-name recruit and didn't have a very good freshman year, was okay as a sophomore, kind of up and down. Command was still rather inconsistent. He's taken that jump as a junior now, and, you'll see him up to 97 with a good breaking ball, and he's got feel for a changeup. So, again, it's a big-bodied right-hander with 3 real good pitches. I mean, not that far from Mize in that respect. So I think Cole Sands has pitched his way strongly into the first round mix. And I would throw Adam Hill in that group as well, guys, risers. Guys who boosted their stock here this year. He had back-to-back 14 strikeout games. I think both of them were 7-inning outings with just 1 hit allowed. It's So again, it's a really good body, tall right-hander. He's added strength. You can see he's more physical this year. And he'll pitch there at 91, 94, touch you a 5, and he's got a good slider and a good changeup. It's a firm changeup, but it's got real action to it. So that's become another pretty darn good weapon for him. I like Adam Hill. That's another guy that on our top 100 list that I think you'll see climb here as we move toward midseason.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So let's take a look now at, the opposite direction, maybe trending down a little bit. We talked about Virginia, so we don't have to go into too much depth on them, a little bit short on time, but with the injuries, they're kind of on that downward trend. So it's not necessarily, poor play or anything like that. But Aaron, just down the street from you and me, what's going on in Chapel Hill?
Yeah, it's been an uneven first month for the Tar Heels, and I wrote about these guys on our site yesterday. Just kind of taking stock of where they are after a month of play because they're 8-7. They're basically a 500 team. I'm not worried about the offense. I think they're going to hit. And they've had a lot of base runners in all these games. They've stranded too many base runners, and that's really been the biggest difference. I mean, they've lost 6 games by a combined 9 runs. So that's. To me, I worry a lot more about teams that aren't getting base runners consistently. If you got guys on base, you're just not getting a big hit. That's gonna come. You're gonna get those hits at the right time eventually. So that stuff evens itself out. They've got talent on offense. I'm a little more concerned about the pitching staff because Luca Delatri is out. Their ace, preseason All-American. There's no timetable for his return. It's one of those stress reaction deals in the elbow. So they're going to be very cautious with him. And without him, the staff is just. It thins out because I do think they're fine on Fridays with Tyler Baum. Austin Bergner, as you guys know, has big-time stuff and just hasn't really put it together yet. He struggled on Saturday. They need him to be better. Just needs to be better. And David Seifert saw him on Saturday this week and liked the stuff, but the performance wasn't there. So he's got to do it. And Rodney Hutchison's got to get back to what he was in the Cape last year. Is a key piece for that staff who's got a 15.43 ERA. It's not going to get it done. So I mean, you got Hyatt, you got Brett Daniels in the bullpen, but there's a lot of strain on those guys right now. With Joey Lancelotti banged up as a freshman, has a great arm. I saw him really good early in the year. They need him back. They need Hutchison to be better. They need Bergner to be better. And right now they're just kind of trying to piece it together on Sundays, which is hard to do in the ACC. It's nice to have that guy who can go out there and give you 5 innings on Sunday, and they don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, moving forward, Aaron, for you, in the preseason, even after the College World Series, kind of an early look, you do an 8 for Omaha. Is there a team that's kind of pushed their way? Maybe they're not in the 8 for Omaha, maybe they are, or at least somebody that has kind of entered that mix for you as the season has, is a month old?
Well, we talked certainly about Stanford as a team that is his stock up. That's in that group now, I would say. And I still feel pretty darn good about the teams in our top 10. I mean, Oregon State and Florida, of course, have taken care of business. And Kentucky was a preseason top 10 team that obviously looks like an Omaha club. Florida State, despite the little hiccup this past weekend at Wake Forest, I think those guys are an Omaha club. I think Texas Tech, tough road series loss at Kentucky this weekend, but even without Stephen Gingery, I think Texas Tech can be an Omaha club. I mean, both those teams, Texas Tech and Florida State, you lost preseason All-American, first team preseason All-American aces, and they really haven't missed a beat. But it does take a toll. I mean, instead of having Gingery and Davis Martin those first 2 days, and you've got to move somebody else into the Sunday spot behind, Martin and John McMillan, and so it does take a toll. I feel like if you're in a super regional matchup and it goes to a third game, maybe you just don't feel as good about your chances. But nonetheless, those teams I think I still feel pretty good about. Ole Miss, has gotten off to a great start. I really like the way those sophomores have developed for them. I guess if there's a team you're looking at that's kind of snuck up a little bit here, it'd be Southern Miss. It's a team that was not in our preseason top 25.
They're physical.
Yeah, they are physical. I think they're going to be pretty good on offense. They had a little bit of a dip on offense this week, but they kept on winning because the pitching has come together nicely. They moved Nick Sandlin from the back of the bullpen into the Friday starter spot. Low slot guy with velocity and tenacity, and he's really good. And Matt Wallner, of course, the reigning National Freshman of the Year, is a superstar. with power at the plate, and he's been a key guy at the back of the bullpen as well. So that's a team that has played its way into the discussion here. If you're looking at Omaha contenders, I feel like for now they'd still be behind the other teams in our top 15, but they're on the map.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you just talked about a couple of those sophomores, Ole Miss sophomores who are rising. Southern Miss has the sophomores, right? What freshmen are we seeing so far who are grabbing some headlines and making a name for themselves?
Yeah, this is a really strong group of freshmen guys, if you ask me. Across the country, there's been some guys put up some really good numbers. I saw Spencer Torkelson of Arizona State, the slugging first baseman, in a midweek game at Blair Field at night, and he had 2 balls out, which is hard to do at Blair Field.
That's very hard to do.
That never happens.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a bunch of home runs already. He can really hit. He's polished, mature freshman with big-time power. I mean, he's impressive. Certainly Zach DeLoach, at Texas A&M has had a huge start.
Mm-hmm.
Hit for the cycle and putting up, hitting around 400, I think, heading into this past weekend, and more walks and strikeouts, hitting for power. I mean, it's that guy's pretty impressive, guys. And I've never seen him. I haven't seen the Aggies yet. That's a guy you guys saw in high school, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that was the thing is he could always hit. He could just really hit. It was super easy in the box. He had rhythm at the plate. And it's no surprise to see him, hitting at the college level. I mean, maybe a little surprised to see him hitting that well, because even for the best hitters, there is a little bit of that adjustment period to the next level. But to see DeLoach, performing at the plate isn't a huge surprise. Out of high school, guys liked the bat, but it was one of those things when it came defensively. It was a little bit of that tweener guy. You didn't think he was going to stay in center field. So then you're talking about a high school bat, as a corner outfielder. You let him go to school and perform for 3 years and prove it at that level, and then he becomes, a top 3 rounder. And I think, it's still his freshman year, still early in his freshman year, but I think we're getting a kind of a window into the future of what that is, what we expected out of DeLoach, and he's certainly doing that. And I feel the same way about Greg Jones. This is a guy that I saw in high school, and Fitzy, you talk about UNC Wilmington has been really good the last couple of years and look like, they're strong again. And Jones can be a dynamic player for them. I saw him in high school, twitchy athleticism, can really run. But I really wanted to see him go to school and kind of prove it with the bat for a little bit more. And it looks like he's hit the ground running with the Seahawks.
Yeah, running literally as well as figuratively. I think that guy can fly. I think the key was how he would mature defensively at shortstop, because he's got all the tools there, but maybe not as polished as a defender. But it sounds like he's doing a nice job there, and I agree with you. He's a dynamic talent. Saw him in the fall and walked away very impressed with him. So, Arkansas's got a great group of freshman guys. Yeah. Heston Kjerstad is a physical specimen, with big time left-handed power potential in that outfield. Casey Martin is a good athlete at third base with a really nice smooth swing. He's got some pop too. I think he's actually got some home runs early on. So that's a nice couple of position player guys. They got guys on the mound. I mean, Bryce Bonin, Jackson Rutledge, who I saw out in San Diego, big time arm, man. He's a monster. I mean, he looks like Rob Gronkowski out there on the mound, and it's for me, he was sitting 94, flashing a really good changeup. Apparently, he's been up to 97, 98 this year. So I mean, that was the second outing in 3 days for him when I saw him. So easy to imagine that there's more in the tank than I saw that day. But he's very interesting as well.
He certainly is. Rutledge is one of those guys that I saw in high school that would break bats on the showcase circuit. It will not shock me if somehow he breaks a metal bat in his 3 years at college, because it's a really heavy fastball. And Bonin, you mentioned, he was he still is a good athlete. He was a really good athlete in high school, but was more of a two-way guy leaning towards the hitting side, didn't pitch as much. And now he's kind of focusing on that pitching, and it sounds like it's really coming around for him. Electric arm. He's got a nasty slider. Toby Bicknell, our guy in Texas, who, Aaron, I know you know him well from his days at Air Force in Kentucky. When I talked to him, he took not a deep cut, but went back a few years to when you and I were at Baseball America. He threw Braden Shipley on him, kind of that athletic shortstop type guy that finds himself on the mound. So he's definitely a guy that's worth watching the next couple of years. So
I got one more sleeper guy for you here as a freshman, and he's cooled off over the past week or two since I saw him in San Diego at the Tony Gwynn Classic. But Tora Otsuka, or Otsuka, I think it's Otsuka, the son of Akinori Otsuka, former big league reliever. Tora, I mean, he plays like he's an Ichiro-style player. I'm not saying he's going to hit 3,000 hits in the big leagues. I'm saying he's an Ichiro-style player with speed, left-handed hitter who can slap the ball around and run. But, there's a little bit of sneaky strength in there, too. He's only 5'9". He's not a big guy, but executes the inside game really well. He's fun to watch, man. He's really a catalyst for that San Diego team. So kind of a neat little under-the-radar freshman to keep an eye on.
Okay, excellent. What, Shooter, you look like you're ready to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I know you're going to wrap it up pretty soon, I just wanted to go on the record because I'm going to carry the torch for the Conference of Champions. Multiple teams in the College World Series this year. It's happening. I'll put their top 3 up against any conference in the country. I just want to make sure that's on the record.
Sign it. Date it.
That's a strong take, Shooter. And certainly Oregon State and Stanford. I mean, they're 2 of the top 3 teams in our rankings right now. I'm not so sure for me that UCLA would stack up to the number 3 team, whoever it is in the SEC. I mean, we've got 5 SEC teams in our top 10. I mean, give me Florida, Kentucky, and Arkansas. I just think those teams are considerably better talent-wise than UCLA is. So for me,
I'm just getting it on the record because in June they're going to travel east and we'll get to see it.
It could happen. And I like UCLA, by the way. And this is another guy that we were going to talk about before we wrap up here is Michael Tolia at UCLA, the sophomore first baseman he's a monster, you guys. I mean, it's just a great body with leverage in that swing. And another guy on my West Coast swing, saw him at a midweek game in Fullerton, at night at Goodwin Field, that heavy air, ball doesn't carry. He hit 2 moonshots, one from each side of the plate. One of them was way into the trees out there in right field over the signage that they've got, and the other one went over the scoreboard in left field. I mean, it was just an impressive
professional hitter.
Impressive display, and I know David Seifert liked him up at the Dairy Queen Classic as well. That guy, for me, is a top 10 kind of talent for next year's draft.
Excellent. Well, if you like college baseball, we just gave you 37 minutes of it. Be sure to jump on d1baseball.com and follow our partners over there with all their coverage throughout the season. Fantastic stuff you guys are bringing out to the interwebs and showing to the college audience. But Aaron, thanks so much for joining us. Looking forward to doing it again sometime soon. But for Shooter Hunt and Aaron Fitt, I'm Nathan Rohde. This is a Coffee and Curveballs, and until next time, we'll see you guys at the ballpark.